Our format today is pretty We've, in the last few years, had tried to let the legislators get their piece. We're going to try to do different questions, maybe keep to 2 minutes if that works, and then we'll rotate. Is that, Lisa, you don't like that idea of 2 minutes? I know, that's why he's in front of me. I can throw things at him there. And if anybody in the audience, for those of you that are new, if you have any questions, please, there's cards on your table and people will come around and collect them. What we ask is the one question card, and that they be addressed to all the legislators. Legislators. We're not going to be asking one legislator one thing. It's all just more of a, this is more of a general topics kind of thing. I think what we'll start, as we normally do, one of the biggest issues is the budget. We hear a lot about it up to the time that it's passed and even after the time that it's passed. So there's a couple new things this year. On the income side, the expansion of gambling, borrowing money against the tobacco settlement, and then also some transfer of funds from what are called dedicated project funds. So I guess if we can start with Representative Mullery, and if he could give us a little bit of his take on the budget process and how these things are going to help on the income side. I think we'll address the income side first of all, and then maybe second round we'll talk about the spending side.
Okay, is this on, Scott? Well, first I wanted to take the opportunity as the first speaker to thank the League of Women Voters for again hosting this breakfast and interaction with the folks here in the audience. We've always found these breakfasts to be a great opportunity for us to meet with well-informed citizens from the community. Also want to take this opportunity to thank my alma mater, King's College, for hosting. They do a great job every year. With regard to the budget process, timely question. We have the governor's address coming up very shortly this week. Looking forward to his plan forward for the Commonwealth. As far as revenue goes, I think you're going to hear a theme across the panel today that we need recurring sources of revenue. Fortunately for us, there are several available to us that, for one reason or another, we have yet to enact. I think the one that everybody is familiar with is a modest severance tax, something that we've failed to do since the industry has come to Pennsylvania. Estimates range from, $200 million to $800 million. I know the senator, given his leadership position in the Senate, could give us some more specifics about that, but I think that's something where we've dropped the ball and we need to pick it up and run with it. Two, on the corporate end, we can close the Delaware loophole. We could move to combined reporting. Conservative estimates on the two of those put us at about $600, $700 million annually that we could receive. So there are absolutely avenues available to us for recurring revenue to help address our budget concerns. The problem is, and I'll use Mike Carroll's term, and I'm sure he'll mention it, where's the appetite in Harrisburg for that? Right now, and over the course of my short tenure in the House, it hasn't been there. So as a result, in my opinion, we've left money on the table. But we're getting to the time where these things have to be placed in the crosshairs, and we have to buck up and address issues that are important to Pennsylvania. Otherwise, we're going to see continued drastic cuts in services, and I think that's what we're going to talk about in the next round. So with that, I'll pass it down to Lisa.
Yes, thank you. Senator Baker.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. I too would like to thank the League. I do look forward to the opportunity to answer questions and have an exchange of ideas and information. As we prepare the governor's budget, secretary came in to see me last week to talk a preview of the upcoming budget message, and I think what you'll hear from the administration is less likely to see a broad-based tax increase as part of this proposed budget. I think, as Representative Mullery mentioned, the governor will likely propose the severance tax on natural gas. I'd like to point out, too, that the impact fee on natural gas has been important in terms of an area that I believe, and I represent 5 counties here in the region. The impact fee has been very important in those areas of natural gas has been drilled. And the impact fee does not pass on the tax to the individual landowner. If you look at, and one of the challenges that we have as we have conversation about a severance tax is the fact that all of the contracts with landowners proportionally share that tax with the landowner. So currently, landowners are not paying the tax, the companies are paying the impact fee. So that would be a significant change that, as someone who represents individuals in significant communities related to the impact fee, that we need to look at, as well as the minimum royalty payment component of it. I will talk a little bit about, in the next round, the budget as it relates to Health and Human Services. I chair the Human Services Committee. That is $40 billion of spending between state and federal resources. It is our biggest cost driver, one of the biggest cost drivers, and one of the areas where I believe we can accrue some potential savings as part of the process.
Thank you, Senator. Well, good morning, everybody. Again, thank you to the League. This is very important for this open discussion. You have a chance to see us face to face and ask us whatever questions you want. We never considered this a roast, and I will work very hard to keep this under 2 minutes. That's one of the most difficult challenges I've ever had. Both Senator Baker and my colleague, Representative Mullery, did a very fine job of laying out a few items to you. I've been a proponent of a fair Marcellus shale tax from the very beginning. And when I say fair, I mean that. I mean, we've met with the industry and we've talked to the industry. When the industry first came to Pennsylvania, they had within their plan, within their fiscal plan, a Marcellus shale tax was already built in. They wouldn't tell me what it was, but that was there because every other state does have that. As the Senator indicated, the impact fee is very important. It does help those communities out with the heavy traffic and the kinds of things that occur. The proposals that we have made makes that impact fee whole. It continues to make sure that those counties receive the benefits that they need in order to take care of the industry. But there's definitely enough dollars left over. The estimates that we have seen of the money that we have lost from 2010 to the present exceeds $2 billion. Once the pipelines are completed and we begin to export the fuel, the price is going to go up. And we're talking about our fuel, your fuel, by the Constitution, that is the people's resource, is going to be exported out of Pennsylvania. You deserve a right for a portion of that. I don't have what the number is. I'll let the experts decide and tell us what would be, whether it's 3%, 4%, 5%, including the impact fee. I'll let them advise us. But there's no way that we should be able to leave on the table between $200 million and $800 million a year when we're trying so desperately to take care of the needs of the community. There will never be enough money for all the things that we need to do, but there's certainly dollars here that we could use to help within the human services, aging, our education system, and the like. Totally against borrowing, against our, oh, is that it? Okay, then I will do it.
All right, thank you.
I'll be good, I promise.
Representative.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Mike Carroll, and it's a pleasure to be here as well. When it comes to the budget, I think that it's fair to say that what we'll have with this year's presentation from the governor, and my suspicion is an embracing by the General Assembly, will be sort of a status quo budget where we will have modest increases in a few areas. The governor highlighted yesterday his desire for $100 million in basic education and some additional dollars for higher ed, which I think it's fair to say I support. The challenge, as usual, will be trying to figure out how you reconcile the expenditures with the revenues. And as Eddie alluded to just a moment ago, last year's budget was built on gambling and borrowing, and we voted for it, and it wasn't the preferable option, it seems to me. But in the absence of other better options, that was the solution for last year's budget. So this year, I think, as all of the speakers prior to me noted, there'll be a discussion of natural gas. There should be a discussion about DEP and the oversight necessary to make sure that we have proper regulation and proper enforcement, and as Senator Baker mentioned, a discussion about the minimum royalty. And then above and beyond natural gas and the potential revenues that could come from a severance tax, I think it's long overdue in this Commonwealth to have a discussion about cyber charter schools and charter schools generally. At our breakfast table this morning, we had a very brief conversation about this, and wasn't on this component of the discussion, but when it comes to cyber charter schools in particular, and charter schools generally speaking, I think it's time to re-examine the dollars that flow to those institutions that have a direct negative effect on not just the state's budget, but on our school districts' budgets. And so for me, in addition to the general conversation that will occur relative to all of the various parts of the budget, I would like to see a discussion about payments to cyber charter schools in particular and charter schools generally speaking.
Thank you. Representative Coffer?
Thank you. Good morning, all. I won't beat a dead horse with some of the comments already made about a severance tax. Obviously, they will be part of the conversation, as well as regulatory reform. But I also think one of the pieces, and I'm going to touch on this just a little bit, is in regard to human services. There's certainly a number of areas that we can make some changes and really bring some dollars back and make some savings in our budget as well. I was talking briefly before with somebody before coming up here about a BSc licensing issue in our state, which are behavioral specialist consultants, which applies to our autism and intellectual disabilities area. And without the BSc license, it's a kind of a chicken or the egg type issue where you need to you need to have a minimum number of hours in order to get the license, but you can't get paid until you work those hours, so you're almost volunteering for those hours, and we need a temporary license or some sort of fix to this. Without that license, you can't bill private insurance. So our state health care is paying for that currently without having a fix in the works. I think there's a lot that can be said for our direct support professionals as well in human services. A lot of people are working, and with our reimbursements, they are actually still receiving benefits. They actually have to be on welfare programs because they don't make enough to be self-sufficient. I think that's a travesty in our state, and I know that they just put forward a pretty comprehensive plan in front of our Human Services Committee about raising the wages for direct support professionals, which would help get people off of some of the benefits that they receive from the state. And I think it could be a huge boom to our state as well as our region with that area of health care. So that's sort of a newer topic that hasn't been discussed yet, so without beating a dead horse, I'll pass it on.
Thank you. Senator Udicek, please.
Thank you very much. If I recall, the question was around the budget and revenue side
That's
of
correct.
the budget. Well, as noted, Governor Tom Wolf on Tuesday will stand before a joint session of the General Assembly. It will be I believe my 19th joint session, and as I sit in that chamber, the words that I hope come out of the governor's mouth will be these: congratulations to the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles. By God, I hope he says that. I hope we could say that. Because I've been waiting a lot longer than 19 years to get a Super Bowl for the Eagles. But the governor has a very difficult challenge, and he has faced that challenge over the last 3 budget cycles, where you have the political realities of Harrisburg, both on the Democrat and Republican side of the aisle, where we have sent folks to Harrisburg who simply want to vote no, who are not interested in working together, who are not interested in taking a difficult vote and making the changes that we need to make in terms of our budgeting process. I favor comprehensive, tax reform across the board. Corporate tax reform, income tax reform, sales tax reform, and most importantly, property tax reform in Pennsylvania. The U.S. Congress was able to pass comprehensive tax reform. And you're already seeing investments being made in the United States in new job creation, in workers, raising wages. Pennsylvania has skirted the issue of comprehensive tax reform. We've gone around the edges, and it's got to a point where we are depending on sin taxes, whether it's on alcohol, tobacco, whether it's on gaming. That is not a way to fund a 21st century school system. That's not a way to fund a 21st century infrastructure system. It's not a way to sustain state government and provide the services that we need to deliver to the taxpayers of Pennsylvania. So hopefully we can get to that point, but we are not going to get to that point on Tuesday. We are going to probably have another status quo budget, just kind of a cash to carry budget, as they call it in the budget office, where the revenues are a little better. That's good news. More jobs are being created. More revenue is being generated. I do not see comprehensive tax reform on the table. We're going to continue to advance it. But when you talk about revenue, you talk about the Pennsylvania budget and building a sustainable budget, the only way to do that is comprehensive tax reform.
Thank you very much. The next we'll start with Senator Baker, and this we'll talk a little bit about the spending side of things. Some of the things that we hear about are reducing the size of the legislature. We hear about pension reform and that how are we going to get those things under control. Please address those issues and any other ways that you feel that we can start to cut back on the spending side of the budget.
Sure. Excuse me.
2 minutes or less.
So last year, we did enact comprehensive pension reform, which was one of the most significant cost drivers to our budget. So if you look at the pension obligation the Commonwealth had, I think the steps that we took last year legislatively were an important component to it. It's not going to solve the entire problem, but it certainly was a step in the right direction. As I mentioned, human services being such a significant portion of our budget, trying to gain efficiencies and cost savings through that will be important. I expect that in this budget, the governor is going to once again request that we consider the combination of the Department of Human Services along with the Department of Health. I don't expect that it will be a 4-agency merger as they proposed last year that did not go any further than an evaluation component. So as you think about $40 billion, what are the significant cost drivers? And the cost drivers are the elderly population here in the Commonwealth. When we look at the numbers, and I brought with me some of the spending numbers, the Medicaid spending on average, and where most of that goes, it generally is not with young people on disabilities, it's not with children or the adults. It's the significant pieces on the aging population. And so the Commonwealth will begin a process of taking our aging services and putting it away from a fee-for-service into a managed care network. And that will be, it is beginning in southwestern Pennsylvania. This year it will migrate through all the Commonwealth through 2020. That will have a significant impact moving forward. One of the other ways that we need to look at the budget, there is an assessment on hospitals that helps provide funding into the budget. We have to reauthorize that hospital assessment. That represents about $250 to $300 million in our budget. So we utilize that as well. The MCOs also, HMOs, pay an assessment as well, and that's a key component, about $250 million. So as we look at this, we'll also hear some discussions about what to do. Should there be work requirements? Should we be looking at innovation and other things within this population population, and the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services are opening that up and allowing states to come in with innovative ideas. We've had some conversation with the department. Because this is such a big cost driver, we should be looking at ways to do that. If it's not work requirements, are there other things that we can put into place to help try to contain costs? So that is the most significant cost driver. It's such a significant component to the budget that I'm hopeful that we can work to get our arms around that piece of it. The other piece of cost savings that you will see, I brought a chart. Our Department of Corrections has actively moved to reduce our inmate population. And when you look at the cost of an average inmate within a correctional facility, it's $35,000 to $40,000 a year. We are seeing reductions in that. And so getting our arms around the cost containment within the correction system, I think will also have a longer term process. You mentioned reduction in the General Assembly. I do support reducing the size of the House of Representatives. As I say that, their average districts represent about 62,000 people. A state Senate seat represents 260,000. So a significantly larger area, and I think that we can have some efficiencies with that, but I don't think it's going to be a major cost saver.
Thank you very much. I should tell people, if you feel like people have addressed the issue well enough, you can certainly pass, because we have a lot of different topics. Thank you, Lisa. That's for a lot of that information. Mr. Pashinsky?
Well, thank you very much, and thank you, Senator, for considering reducing our House. Let me start off with that one first. I voted against it, and I will continue to vote against it. I say to you, if we should reduce the size of the House, why did we build such a huge room for the House members? Both on the level of the federal government with our huge state capitol, and same thing in Pennsylvania, one of the most beautiful capitol buildings in the entire country. The purpose of having a large representation of representatives and congressmen was so there would be more one-on-one with your representative. The senator, I'm sure, will admit that although they are much smaller than us, there's only 50, the size of their staff and the number of offices that they need to have in order to conduct business and help the people that they have to, their constituents, the senator represents over 240, 250,000 people. Countless times I'm told, how come we always see you here at these meetings? We never see our senator. And I say, listen, the senator has an area that's 4 times the size of mine. So number one, the purpose of having more representatives is actually to be there available to the people. The cost savings will be minimal. The other thing I want everybody to be concerned about, and hopefully they'll print my editorial, there's a phrase that they've used. The more representatives, the less they can buy off. Right now, I know that sounds comical, but that is the truth. Right now, money is poisoning our democracy. There's too much money in the system at the present time. It's there because of Citizens United, for those of you that know what that is. So now, instead of, in this room, there's countless number of people that are qualified and capable and hopefully willing to run for a house. The average cost of a state house representative run is over $100,000. You go to California where there's only 80 representatives, their average cost to run for that job is $560,000. You go to Illinois where there's 118 representatives, the cost to run is over $300,000. So for people like us, regular, hardworking folks, where am I going to get $500,000 to run? I'm going to have to get it from somebody. And if somebody's going to give me 50 grand or 100 grand, what does that say? Do I owe someone? On a national basis, it's millions of dollars. So if I want to run for Congress, I better come up with a couple $1 million.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
Well, I only talked on that one issue.
I know. We're trying to keep it all on cutting spending, if we could sort
Okay,
of
well,
keep it-
that's about spending. But the biggest cost driver in all of this is health care. You've heard me say it before, and when I get the mic again, I'm going to use my minutes on health care.
Okay,
There are
Thank
a
you.
few core things that the state government needs to do, and among those core items is to provide for an education for the children of this Commonwealth. And for me, I will focus, as I usually do, on the basic ed funding component of the budget, the amount of money that we direct to our 500 school districts, which has a direct effect on how well we can educate the children in all these school districts. It has the ancillary effect of also trying to help minimize future property tax increases. If the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania properly funds the 500 school districts, there's less of a reliance on the 5 school directors in each of these school districts to have to raise property taxes. And so for me, I am eager and looking forward to having a discussion about the basic ed funding level that will be directed to the 500 districts, the funding formula to make sure that we fairly distribute the funds throughout the Commonwealth so that our 500 school districts and the students that go there receive a solid education. And as I said earlier, the side benefit with respect to property tax, minimizing future property tax increases. You know, the other thing that I'll mention, because I feel compelled to, is that the other thing that the Commonwealth needs to do among its core responsibilities is to provide for a safe and efficient transportation network. I was proud to be an advocate for Act 89, which was the transportation funding bill a few years ago. The benefits of Act 89, I think, are evident throughout northeastern Pennsylvania and beyond our region, but throughout the Commonwealth. And it's important that we make sure that the benefits that accrue to the citizens of this state as a result of that transportation funding bill are not minimized because of an attack on the motor license fund by the general fund. So those two items, among a whole series of others, you know, when you're in a forum like this, it's almost a case of which of your children you love the most. You know, you can only have the opportunity to mention 1 or 2 items in a 2-minute period. And so for me, I'll just mention basic ed and as well as higher ed and transportation funding, with the full expectation that my constituents expect me to pay attention to all of the various lines in the budget and make sure that at least the people that I represent in Lackawanna and Luzerne County are fairly treated when it comes to the disposition of state funds.
thank you. And could we, again, if we could try to talk about how can we cut back the spending side of the budget. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm gonna hit a new topic once again, and something that we just passed out of the House maybe about a month ago. Senator Baker talked about the rising costs for our aging population, and one of the bills that's out there is in regard to presumptive eligibility. When somebody is to leave an emergency situation, leave a hospital, they're presumed eligible to go into a nursing home. However, we have issues that they are not presumed eligible to go back to their own home to receive services, which is typically where people want to be, and a much cheaper way of providing services. So we've been working with comprehensive, all the different stakeholders in regard to this. We've put forward a bill. It's Representative Bernstein's bill. I worked with him on this bill, that you would be presumptively eligible to not only be in a nursing home, but be able to go back to your own home and be able to receive services there as well. I do want to touch base. Senator Udicek mentioned about comprehensive tax reform. In the House, there is a special subcommittee, I believe, that was formed to look at our tax structure in Pennsylvania. That they've been meeting and having hearings across the Commonwealth, so hopefully they will come out with a proposal here soon to address that as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Before I'll address one specific topic on the spending side, however, I want to help out my colleague, Representative Paszynski, if he's having trouble finding his senator at events. Over the last few years, he could come to any one of these events and find me. When we created 1,000 jobs in the city of Wilkes-Barre with Guard Insurance, McCarthy Tire, and Pepper Jam. when we invested $90 million in the South Valley Parkway and created 3,000 jobs with North Point. We invested $9 million in Solomon Creek, a 50-year problem now being solved by Mayor George. Eddie, you can come to any one of those events. I'll be there. You could say hello. On the spending side, DEP, Representative Carroll and I have the great honor to serve as the Democratic chairs of the Environmental Committee. Often you hear from politicians, cut spending, reduce staff, cut state workers. Well, what has happened since Governor Rendell, Governor Corbett, and Governor Wolf? We've seen the Department of Environmental Protection shrink. Their budget's been cut by 40%. Their staff is down 25%. Almost 800 people have been let go from the Department of Environmental Protection. That has an impact both on the quality of environmental protection, and it also impacts the bottom line of businesses when it comes to the permitting process. If it takes you 2 years or 3 years to get a permit, that's millions of dollars to the bottom line of a business, and it impacts environmental protection. We're moving a bill that I've introduced, and it's supported, bipartisan support, to address permit reform at DEP, to fully understand and get baseline data whether that reduction of staff is hurting the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania in terms of its budgeting, in terms of environmental protection, and in terms of creating jobs. So there are things that are often said at these kind of forums, raise revenue, cut spending, but there's an impact. There's an impact to those cuts, and I think the cuts at DEP are starting to impact how we do business in Pennsylvania and how we protect the quality of the environment in Pennsylvania.
Thank you. Representative Mullery will get you the microphone.
Thank you. When you talk about reducing the size of the legislature, I fully support that, but I'll take it a step further. I support a part-time citizen-based legislature. If you truly want to see a cost savings associated with the way we run our government, and if you truly want to focus, as Representative Carroll said, on the core issues of importance to the people of Pennsylvania, and if you truly want, as Representative Paszynski said, our hard-working, blue-collar men and women involved in our political process, then let's make it a part-time citizen-based legislature where people who are working on passing these laws have to return home to their districts and work within the confines of the laws that they've created. And once you do that, you're going to see, I think, a dramatic savings in the cost of our state government. You want to eliminate it further? Let's eliminate the Senate. I was asked in Harrisburg one day by somebody, Mike Carroll was present to this conversation, if you could eliminate 3 things in Harrisburg, what would you eliminate? And automatically I said the Senate, and I was like, why did I say that? I don't know. I also support, as we talked, I think we could save some money with the merger of several of the departments in Harrisburg. Senator Baker talked about Health and Human Services. There's also talks about merging Fish and Boat with Game, talks about merging Department of Corrections with Parole and Probation. I'm certain that we have a lot of duplication of services being provided. We have a lot of duplication of leadership, and with some of those mergers, if properly studied, I think we can save some money. One thing I do disagree with the Senator on, though, is why we're seeing a reduction in our inmate population. Just last week, Governor Wolf and Secretary Wetzel issued a press release talking about how satisfied they were with our decreased inmate population. Well, the question that has to be asked, in my opinion, is why? Why are we seeing that? Well, the answer is threefold. Number one, we're sending a lot of our state inmates to county facilities. Number two, we're sending a lot of our state inmates to group homes and community service facilities. And number three, and most importantly, we are not reincarcerating parole violators. We're simply not doing it. I had a hearing last week in Reading, spoke with people from the corrections side, and they explained why under an act that was passed in 2016, we're simply not putting criminals who have violated parole back in prison. And I question, why are we doing that? Are we doing that so that we can show numbers of reduced incarcerated inmates so that we could support an argument to close prisons? If that's true, that's something that needs to be looked at further, and I know I and Senator Yudichak are very concerned about that issue, and we'll make certain that we're not massaging numbers to support an ultimate end goal.
Thank you. Next, we'll start with Representative Paszynski, and one of the issues that the League of Women Voters and many people across the Commonwealth are very interested in is the gerrymandering issue. There are current bills pending in both the House and the Senate, which would create an independent Citizens Commission to take over the congressional and legislative redistricting. We'd like to have your opinion on how this process is going. Are you in favor of it or not? And also, how does the legislature intend to respond to the court order to provide the information to create the legislative districts, and will they follow the court order? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm sure that's certainly on all of our minds, but before I hit that, let me just say that I think you can see the camaraderie that we have amongst each other, and I mean this sincerely. I can reach out to my senator, Senator Yudichak, Senator Baker, whoever, and we always work together on things. So there was no way, Senator Yudichak, that I was referring to you on that last thing, but I made the point to these folks that congressmen have 700,000 constituents. They can't be as many places as we are, and a United States senator has the whole state. So when people say to me, you know, we never see our senator, I say, you're talking about 12.8 million people that senator has to see. So in that case, let me try to get now with the gerrymandering. You know, every 10 years, the idea is to reevaluate where the population growth has risen or where it's declined, and what areas have contiguous nature and some similarities. And the idea is to make sure when you draw the district that it's fairly drawn so that the people have the choice of their representative or senator, whoever they're going to vote for. Over the last two decades, the process has become oh, I'm trying to look at the word. What's the word? Flawed. That's a good word, flawed. And I think for those of you that have read or seen the pictures of the maps, you've seen how the maps just don't make any kind of sense. Where it's going from New York all the way down to York, or where it's in and out of various areas that are contiguous to one another. That's designed, you know, to manipulate the vote. That's designed to protect certain areas. And that's not what the purpose of it was. The purpose is to make sure that the people have their right to vote, to be heard, and to have a competition between all parties so that the people can make that selection. As far as the decision goes, I think that the gerrymandering is definitely obvious. If you were going to look at the maps and you were to take a look at the voter registration, it's remarkable. Back in 1990, when I'm going back then, the Democrats held 48% of the electoral vote, and they held 52% of the House, of the legislators. The Republicans had 38%, and they held something like 48%. Today, the Democrats hold 47% of the electorate. We now seat 28%. The Republicans have 38% of the electorate, and they seat 72% of the members. So what's happened over this time frame is it's been skewed. And having the Pennsylvania State Supreme Court make the ruling that it's unconstitutional, I want to remind everybody, back in 2011, when they were drawn the first time, it was unconstitutional again with a Republican Supreme Court, and now it's a Democrat Supreme Court that has decided that this gerrymandering is illegal. I support that. All we're looking for is a fair geographic area. There should be no one that skews the map or skews the numbers for the sake of one political party or another. It's up to the people to decide. So I think there should be a fair redrawing of the maps, and I would support, you know, that ruling.
Representative Carroll.
Thank you. The question about the redistricting and the two bills that are before the General Assembly with respect to the redistricting as are supported by legal women voters, I support. And I look forward to having an opportunity to vote on those, and might even come this week. My suspicion is, as part of the discussion relative to the reduction in the size of the General Assembly, there'll be an opportunity this very week to vote on the redistricting reform bills that are being advanced by the League of Women Voters. Sadly, that effort failed a week or so ago when the State Government Committee entertained that very amendment, and it was defeated. But we will have another chance on the floor this week. And so I think that it's high time, as I've said at these forums many times in the past, that we have a discussion about campaign finance reform and about redistricting reform. If we're really going to attack how this state is governed and try and reach a more equitable and fair way to govern this state, there has to be a discussion about redistricting and there has to be a discussion about campaign finance. Because without those two pieces of the puzzle in play, it's going to be very hard to change the very nature of how we govern this state. And so I think that as this reduction in the size of the General Assembly bill advances, there'll be a discussion relative to redistricting reform, and it is quite ironic that that will all occur at a very moment in time when the U.S. Supreme Court is considering a request for a stay with respect to the congressional maps that are before us today. And so I congratulate the League, and I know that one of the plaintiffs is in the room, relative to this case for bringing this matter to the forefront. It really is important that we have a discussion about how these maps are drawn to try and reach a fair way to draw the maps with the full knowledge that Pennsylvania is not Nebraska or Iowa with respect to having counties that are squares or rectangles. We have some weird-shaped counties in this state. I'd offer Northumberland County as an example. If you're not familiar with Northumberland County, take a look. No one in the right mind would draw a county in that shape, yet it exists. But we have to find a way to have communities of interest that are clustered together in districts, whether it's for the State House, the State Senate, or congressional districts. It's important that people that have common interests are represented in these districts so that the folks that represent them in Harrisburg or Washington have the ability to cast votes that are representative of the folks that are in those districts.
I agree with a lot of what was said. I support the redistricting reform measure. I'm a supporter, a co-sponsor. I think if anybody wants to see a fun district as well, I know you mentioned Northumberland County, look up Goofy Kicking Donald Duck. If you type that into a Google search, you will find a congressional district down outside of Philadelphia, it's currently Congressman Meehan's district, which is held together in certain places by one building. Once by a seafood restaurant. It actually holds together part of the district. I think in another section it's a doctor's office, and it's really quite an interesting looking district that I don't think that even some of the most creative artists could ever come up with. But that is one of the districts we have. Where we're at right now, I think, is very interesting, just looking at it through the judicial lens of what's being determined right now with this case. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court has thrown out the districts, and we're still waiting to hear the exact the reasoning behind the decision. But with the decision going on right now at the Supreme Court level, I find it quite interesting because the Pennsylvania Supreme Court said if we don't reach the deadline of drawing it through the legislature with the governor's approval, that the court will draw the district. So right now, where that is that in the U.S. Constitution, if I'm not mistaken, it says that the state legislatures shall draw the district, which now makes it at a very interesting point of the breakdown of powers, which is why the U.S. Supreme Court is debating whether to hear this, because even though there was a decision of 5-2 on the districts not being constitutional, there was a 4-3 decision on what the remedy was. And I believe there's a question of what the exact remedy is, and I don't believe that it is a court duty to draw the districts. It is specifically given to the state legislature, and while we do need the redistricting form and that measures to pass, I don't think that having the court draw it is what was intended in our Constitution.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for taking up the issue of redistricting reform. I think it is the single most important reform that we can enact in Harrisburg for this reason. If you want comprehensive tax reform, if you want a functioning state government, you have to have competitive elections. Unfortunately, whether it's Democrats drawing the lines or Republicans drawing the lines, partisan redistricting, making a Democratic district or a Republican district means you don't have competitive elections. Those representatives don't answer to you, they're answering to party bosses. I've been through 2 redistricting processes, one in the House, one in the Senate. My district was changed dramatically in both cases not because the Republicans were trying to punish me. There were Democratic leaders who felt I was not Democrat enough, and so my district changed. Same thing happened to Representative Mulray. He represented the House seat. That House seat, the 119th district, which was a Wyoming Valley seat, is now a seat that sprawls into greater Hazleton. When you get out of common interest, community interest, and competitive elections, that's why you have dysfunctional government, whether it's in Washington or whether it's in Harrisburg. Empower people to select their representatives from their community. Don't let that process be driven by leaders out of Harrisburg or out of Washington.
Thank you. I think I've been one of the most outspoken members of the delegation on this issue since I've been in the State House. I was the only member of the Northeast delegation to provide testimony before the Redistricting Commission because I saw no proper avenue to say that Larksville should be in the same legislative district as Whitehaven, or Plymouth should be in the same legislative district as Jeddo, or how West Hazleton should be separate from Hazleton City proper, or how all 5 of my school districts are represented by multiple legislators in the State House when they're some of the smallest school districts in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Aaron talked about looking at Goofy kicking Mickey or whatever it is. I think we've been too focused on looking at the shapes of these districts, and we've been too focused on looking at what party has more folks registered in each of these districts instead of looking at the real important issue, which is what has been the result of these districts being drawn the way that they've been drawn. And the result of the gerrymandering has been an inability to govern properly. Because you have folks sitting in the House and Senate in Harrisburg, and to quote John, what John said earlier, who are there to do one thing, and that's vote no. Because they have no fear of reprisal from the people that sent them to Harrisburg. Because their districts have been drawn in such a way that they can take such an ideological stance on an issue and never have to worry about compromising or cooperating, not just with people on the other side of the aisle, but with people on their side of the aisle or with people in administration, because there's no fear. The only fear that they have is not taking a position far enough to one side of the political spectrum or the other, because they may get a primary challenge. And when that's the problem that we're facing in Harrisburg, it creates the ultimate mistrust because we can't properly govern. And that's why what the League of Women Voters did in bringing this case, why what they did in failing to adhere to the Senate Republican request to have them withdraw their case days before the court issued their decision, and why it's so important that they continue to push this issue forward is vitally important to our democracy. Is anybody in this room surprised that Senator Scarnati has failed to comply with the Supreme Court order to turn over the voter records? I'm not. I mean, he disregarded the Constitution of the state. Why should he comply with the Supreme Court's order? So this is an extremely important issue. We have a representative from a congressional candidate in the room today. They have no idea who they're going to represent in Congress. You have folks who are making life-changing decisions to seek a career in public service who don't know if they're even going to live in the district that they hope to represent. So it's quite an important issue, and I'm looking forward to this being resolved. And we focus too much also on the congressional district. This is an issue that, as John mentioned and I outlined for you, that affects all of our districts here on the state level and in the House and the Senate as well.
Thank you. It's a two-part question. So the first part I will address related to the legislation. I have met with many interested individuals and groups in my Senate district who are in support of Senate Bill 22, Senator Lisa Boscola's bill. I have not co-sponsored the bill specifically, but I have been very consistent in my position that I do believe taking the legislative approach out of the redistricting process is appropriate. There are 4 or 5 different bills that have been introduced in the Senate. I'd like to hear more about what those approaches are. The one component to Senate Bill 22 that troubles me, and I've shared this with others, is there's a lack of geographic balance in a random selection. And so I'd like to talk to the experts. I've been doing my own research to look at potentially introducing my own plan and my own proposal to address what I think is an important component, so that there is some geographic balance as part of that. I think the notion that we should move forward with a very robust hearing process, I support that. I have communicated that with the chair of the Senate State Government Committee, Senator Fulmer, and it is my hope that he will continue to move that forward and conduct those. The second piece on the Supreme Court decision is Representative Pashinsky mentioned the court ruled in 2011 only on the legislative districts, not on the congressional districts. So that's an important component. When they sent that back to us, to the commission to do that, it took a year to redraw that. So the process certainly allowed for that. The remedy in the court, and I know, Bob, that you are one of the folks who challenged that. I think, as Representative Coffer mentioned, it is the responsibility of the General Assembly to draw that based on the Constitution. And so that is a troubling component of the court ruling. The court went, I think, beyond what I would consider a timeline for us to act, giving us 19 days to act. Issuing an order without an opinion, I think was not appropriate. And the possibility of a court-imposed map, I think could be just as unconstitutional. So I think we need to be moving in the direction of a constitutional amendment that creates a new process, and not having the whole court issue. It was mentioned that the Senate leadership has gone in and asked for the stay. Those briefs were filed by 4 o'clock on Friday, and it is our hope that we'll get a decision, because a stay was issued in North Carolina based on the fact that the Wisconsin case is being heard at the U.S. Supreme Court. So this all kind of complicates it a little bit, but I do think we need to move forward on a process and a newer approach to how we redistrict.
Thank you. The next, we'll start with Representative Carroll. We have many questions on school funding, property tax reform, and the Pittsburgh plan to give some funding to community colleges, and how we're going to fund all of that. So if you could address the whole concept of educational funding and how we're going to move forward on that issue.
In 2 minutes.
Well, you get a little more here and there.
Wow. As I said earlier, I mean, basic ed funding in this state is a huge component of the state budget, and it affects every single citizen of our Commonwealth, whether you have children in the school district or not. Because as property owners, you all know that there are property tax bills that come twice a year. And the second one that comes is the school property tax bill, and that is the one that really is a tough one. And so I think it's fair to say, from my perspective, that the Commonwealth has not done a very good job of providing adequate funding to the 500 school districts. And as a result, those of us in Harrisburg can declare every year, good news, we didn't raise your taxes, and bad news for 5 school directors in every school district in our state, that they're going to have to put up yes votes to raise property taxes, because we in Harrisburg can say we didn't raise your taxes. I think that it's really important that we not only come up with the correct amount of money to provide to the 500 districts, but also to come up with a distribution mechanism that more fairly treats the districts. We have, I think among the 50 states, we're second from the last in terms of a fair distribution model. I think Vermont is the only state, which I can't explain why Vermont would be worse than us when it comes to this, but somehow they are, that we are 49th among the 50 states with respect to a fair distribution formula when it comes to school districts. This is really complicated stuff because when you start down the path in Pennsylvania of assessing and determining how much money are going to go to school districts, and you start picking districts that will get less year over year, get ready for some pushback, because it's really easy to say to the Wilkes-Barre School District, good news, the new funding formula is going to direct more money to the Wilkes-Barre School District. No one in Wilkes-Barre is going to complain about that. The complaint will come when you say to Abington Heights, bad news for you, you're going to get a little less. And then they're going to say, whoa, wait a minute, time out. That doesn't sound like a good idea to us. And so what we've had with respect to the funding formula is a redirection of the funds that are new funds. So the funding formula affects new dollars that are directed so that those dollars are divvied up under the new formula, but the existing dollars that had been appropriated in the past are distributed under the old formula. That's really deep end of the pool stuff because, again, when you start down the path of telling some districts they're going to get a little less, it's really hard. But the fact of the matter is that we have to do a better job of making sure that the state is a fair partner when it comes to the 500 districts. When you consider the importance that those school districts have of making sure that the students that are generated that graduate from the various school districts are capable of living and advancing in their life, whether it's to higher ed or into the workforce, it really is critical. And so it's pretty easy for us in Harrisburg to say, good news, we didn't raise your taxes, and then we just pass the responsibility off to the 500 districts. I think it's time that the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and those of us that serve in the General Assembly make the tough decisions relative to how we fund these public schools and not just simply pass along the responsibility to the school districts and the school directors to raise property taxes.
Thank you.
I'm going to get a little more into the weeds, and I know Representative Carroll mentioned some of this, but we do have a basic ed formula. We had a commission that was in place. They developed a new formula, and it's new dollars that will go into that formula currently. In my 4 school districts that I represent, every single one of them benefits from the new formula versus the old formula. So I'm a big proponent of the new formula. So when we're looking at the basic ed funding, one of the pieces is a provision under which the old formula took place was called hold harmless, which was based on a formula going back to the 1990s on funding education, which really benefits a lot of different areas, specifically the western part of the state. So as Representative Carroll was saying, how do we divvy up and what's the formula? We get a lot of pushback from the western part of the state on trying to run dollars through this new formula. So one of the things that I'm hoping that we can do as a region and as different areas that benefit versus are not is try to use some of those old dollars instead of just new dollars that are coming in, but run some of those older dollars, 10%, scale it over time to run them through the new basic ed formula to create more equity and funding across the Commonwealth on that. But also I think there's one other issue that I'm hoping the governor will address in the budget address, and that is the property tax issue. Just on the ballot in November, a homestead referendum allowing up to a 100% homestead exemption passed overwhelmingly in the state. In most regions, I think there were only a handful of counties that did not pass it, but it did pass the Commonwealth, and I'm hoping, and I don't have any insight on this, I did not meet with the budget secretary, so maybe Senator Baker or somebody can enlighten me on this, of whether he will propose a homestead exemption as part of this. I'm hoping that something will come forward and it wasn't just a blank vote, but something that we can actually do to fund and to start bringing our property taxes down in the Commonwealth and in our region.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I, too, support Senate Bill 76, property tax elimination in Pennsylvania. We got it to a tie vote in the Senate. First time it got to the Senate floor in the history of the Senate. Tie votes fail. We had to go back to the drawing board, and I think Senator Orgel, Senator Schwank, a Democrat out of Reading, a Republican, Senator Dave Orgel out of Schuylkill, and Senator Fulmer, Republican out of Lebanon County, along with myself, we're trying to reevaluate that position. Senate Bill 76 eliminated property taxes on commercial property as well as residential. We're looking at uncoupling those two and looking at a straight homestead property tax elimination. That's about $8 billion. I think that would be a significant investment in the Pennsylvania economy and provide tremendous relief to those homeowners that are struggling to pay their property taxes. And it puts a little more responsibility. I agree with Representative Carroll. Commonwealth of Pennsylvania has a responsibility to fund a fair and efficient public education system. It's the greatest invention of our democracy in this country, the public education system. It's drawn more people out of poverty, and given them the ladder of opportunity to either to go on to a trade school, go on to college, go into the workforce, and make their way. Investments in education are important. That's on the public secondary side. On higher education, it's the one area that has always been of great interest to me, and it's frustrating that the Commonwealth does not pay as much attention to higher education. We spend $2 billion on higher education, but we don't pay attention to how those dollars are invested. I'll give you one example. I'm a Penn State graduate. My undergraduate degree and graduate degree are both from Penn State. Unabashed supporter of the state-related schools. However, the Auditor General, Gene DePasquale, recently produced a report. We spend about $300 million every year on Penn State. And the purpose of that $300 million is to keep tuition lower for in-state students here in Pennsylvania. However, over the last 30 years, tuition has increased by over 535% at Penn State. Clearly, that is not an efficient way to keep tuition affordable for middle-class families like mine. And thank God for Joe and Sally Dechak that I was able to graduate Penn State with no debt. That's rare. I have 4 daughters. They're likely not going to have that same luxury of graduating without debt. We need to do a better job on the higher education side in terms of the investment. I served on the FIA board. I know Representative Carroll is now on the FIA board. Whether more investments in making college more affordable, and I see Sue Spry from Luzerne County Community College and Tom Leary, the president of the community college, they've done a phenomenal job. Not only to get in all of the cities, Hazleton, Nanticoke, Wilkes-Barre, and Pittston, they're an affordable access point to a quality education in addition to being our workforce development engine. Investing in public education, whether it's higher education or secondary school, is essential to the success of Pennsylvania.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now I know why John dresses nicer than me. I'll be paying my student loans for 10 years after my house is paid off. And that's a fact. People don't believe that, but you know, it was worth it. I'm one of the 10 prime sponsors of HB 76. I won't go into the weeds on that. I'll talk about something new that hasn't been talked about by Mike, Aaron, or John yet. I'm on the Education Committee in the House. I'm also one of only 4 members of the Subcommittee on Career Readiness and Technical Education. We are working in a bipartisan manner right now to put together a package of bills to help support those programs and the students that participate in them. We need, as a Commonwealth and as a culture, to get over the stigma or the stereotype that the only way to success is through a 4-year college degree. As a member of this subcommittee, I've traveled throughout the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I have met with leaders and administrators from a wide array of technical schools, from gunsmithing schools to airplane repair schools, welding schools, etc. And what they are telling me is that they're offering an expedited program, sometimes 12, 18, or 24 months, at 1/5 to 1/6 the cost of a college education, providing their students with the ability to have a starting salary of $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year. And that employers are coming to their graduation ceremonies looking to exclusively be the hire of their entire graduating class. Yet despite that, they are having trouble recruiting students into their programs. And I think that a lot of that is based upon our public school teachers, our public school guidance counselors, and these students' parents who have the mistaken belief that my child has to go to King's or my child has to go to Wilkes, when in fact that may not be the route best suitable for that child. So we need to address that at an earlier age, and that's something that this bipartisan committee that I'm on is attempting to do. The other thing I wanted to talk about, and John hit on it right there at the end of his comments, is the importance of Luzerne County Community College here in our region. Luzerne County Community College is often the only post-high school avenue for many of our constituents. It is the place where first-generation college students go. It is the place where our working folks who have full-time jobs during the day go in an effort to better their lives, maybe teach them a new skill, or provide them with a career change. So anything that I can do to assist LCC in increasing their reach, and as John mentioned, they've done that successfully over the past few years, is very important to me and the constituents I represent. Not to mention they have been a key component in the revitalization of downtown Nanticoke with the Culinary Arts Building and the Health Sciences Building. So I think when we're talking about education, we can't just think about K through 12. We can't just think about the four-year degrees. There's a whole other avenue out there that's available to our children and young adults and those seeking a career change, and anything we can do to foster enrollment and development of those programs I think is important.
Thank you. Much has already been covered, so I won't repeat it, but I would use, as a follow-up on the workforce development component, I have a high school in my Senate district, Honesdale High School, that has worked with the career educators, the community, businesses around the area to create an ag program for the ag services industry. You know, obviously, there's a great interconnection between that and tourism. And oddly enough, through this whole process of identifying locally, hiring a teacher for the school to run this program, it wasn't recognized by the Department of Labor and Industry as a high priority occupation. And so what I think we need to make sure of as well is that there is cooperation and coordination as you are planning locally and looking at career and technical education, that there isn't a missing link there where the Department of Labor is not involved. As we talk about school funding and the homestead exemption, many people thought gaming was going to solve that. How many of you get, if you live in Dallas, $52 from that, and maybe if you're in Lake Lehman, it's $96. That certainly didn't provide enough funding to support that. And when we look at the homestead exemption and Senate Bill 76, one of the things that we've all discussed, if you look around the Commonwealth, there are school districts, and I will cite one in the Senate district, Delaware Valley, 42% of the homeowners who pay taxes in Delaware Valley do not live in Pennsylvania. 42%, which is why a waiving of all property taxes on those out-of-state residents would have been very problematic for that school district. So the homestead exemption component that we voted on will allow us to still collect the dollars from those who are from out of state. One other thing that we can't lose sight of, and have visited Head Start, pre-K counts, and those other programs, the investments we're making in young children are just as important as well. So, thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Well, I don't think anybody is opposed to educating our children. I think historically, statistically, we all know that education is a way for our children to become a successful, productive individual, and they become adults. Just recently, a couple weeks ago, we were out in Pittsburgh, and this job development came up. We have the cracker plant out there, and that's where we're going to be utilizing our natural gas, and they're creating all these different chemicals. Going to be 6,000 jobs building the plant, and then there's going to be literally several thousand workers that's going to be involved. And we're in this transition period, and the transition period is understanding that there are many kids that are very bright that will be in the need of a new form of education within industry. I come from a coal miner's family. So my father and I'm sure just everybody else's father, didn't want their sons going in the mines. They said, I don't care what you do, but you're going to college. And that was the standard at that time. And that is still something that needs to be addressed, because we realize that education is important, whether it's a 4-year or a 2-year. We have that system, PASHE, which is our state schools, which is fairly affordable. We also have our community colleges, which are extremely affordable and really help out a lot of kids. And then, of course, we have our private institutions. But the point being, it was go to college because that degree will help you get a job. Now, we're realizing that we need people within the field, within industry. And that's what the whole hearings that we had out in Western Pennsylvania was about. They don't have qualified people to take these excellent jobs. So we need to develop that system. The kids that come out of that 2-year college degree, they can start off making $50,000, $60,000 a year and not have any college debt. When it comes to eliminating the property taxes, who would be against that? Love to eliminate the property taxes. Where do you replace the money? And this is where we're all struggling, trying to find a balance. So if you were to eliminate the property taxes, you're talking about $12 to $14 billion you have to replace it. The only place we can replace it with is sales tax increase and expansion or personal income tax increase. And as a result, this is the problem that we've been facing, trying to reduce your property taxes, which we all want to do, but how do you do it? What's that combination? If we increase the sales tax from 6 to 7%, in Philadelphia, it goes from 8 to 9%. They don't want that, because then they're non-competitive with New Jersey. In Pittsburgh, it's 7%. If you increase it, it goes to 8. Now they're non-competitive in Ohio. So it is a very complex situation. The homestead exemption, making sure we try to help all our homeowners and then keep the businesses, because that's worth $3 to $4 billion. Right now, with the uniformity clause, they get that gift. That'd be a $3 to $4 billion gift. Here you go. You don't have to pay that anymore. So it comes down to the word balance. How can we do it? And one final thought. You know, I taught school for a long time. When I first started teaching, the teacher came in and imparted knowledge about a particular subject to the children. And they were to take that in. There was a paper bag lunch, or some of the schools actually had a cafeteria. It's no longer that way. Your school now has become the haven for these children that do not have the family structure to give them the love and nurturing. Today, we don't provide lunch. We provide lunch, breakfast, dinner. We provide programs after school. We provide programs on weekends. We provide programs in summer, because we have recognized the fact if we invest in those children early, they have a chance actually to succeed and become a productive citizen. If we don't invest in them, now we go back to incarceration at $35,000 to $40,000. So life is, and if I can just use this analogy, most of the public see the tip of the iceberg. We are trying to deal with what's below the surface, and it's always much, much larger than is perceived on top. So with your help and our camaraderie that we have here, we're going to continue to work hard to try to find those answers. But keep those questions coming.
Okay, thank you very much. This will start with Representative Coffer. This has to do with climate change. What is your position on Senate Bill 15, the Pennsylvania Climate Change Mitigation Act? It is on Pennsylvania's moral, ethical, and fiduciary responsibility to reduce emissions of greenhouse gases by 30% in 2025.
So I turned over to our Senate chairman, and I was going to pass it off to him to answer it. I'm not aware of the specific bill. I don't think it's left the Senate. No, it's still in committee. I have not read the bill before, and without seeing the bill, I don't want to comment too much in depth on it. I do believe that climate change is an issue we need to be addressing. I'm a big fan of nuclear energy, wind, geothermal, solar, all that. Actually, in one of the code bills, which my bill for the emergency detox centers was part of the admin code for this year's budget, was including a fix for our solar energy as well. So actually the reimbursements through our solar panels. I don't know that bill specifically and wouldn't feel comfortable speaking about that specific bill, but whoever asked that question, be happy if you want to come up and talk with me about it.
Does anybody
Thank you.
Does anybody specifically want to address that question, or is anybody familiar enough with it to?
The issue
Yes.
The issue of climate change, of course, is very important on several fronts. Representative Coffer referenced nuclear, an emissions-free electric generation industry that is experiencing serious challenges in the current economy, a large part because of the growth of natural gas and cheap natural gas, which is making it very difficult for Pennsylvania's 5 nuclear plants. In fact, you saw TMI outside of Harrisburg is likely going to close. That's 1,000 jobs, many of them building trade jobs. They're going to go away because of this volatility in the energy market. I've tried to always advance, as the Democratic chair of the Environmental Committee, Environmental and Energy Committee, Pennsylvania should have a diverse portfolio of energy. We're blessed, more blessed than just about any other state in the nation and just about any country in the world, in that whether it's coal refuse, whether it's wind and solar, whether it's nuclear and natural gas. And by the way, I have all of those in some respect in the 14th Senatorial District. I have the largest solar plant in Pennsylvania down in Carbon County, some of the great wind power plants in Pennsylvania, here in Luzerne County, in addition to nuclear coal refuge. Coal refuge industry, which we were able to get into the second tier of the Energy Portfolio Standards Act a few years ago, and then just recently be able to put $7.5 and now $10 million in tax credits for that industry. That industry has a double benefit, not only of creating jobs in the neighborhood of close to 4,000 jobs in Pennsylvania, it also helps us reclaim or abandoned coal lands. That private-public partnership between the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and the private industry, the coal refuse, has cleaned up thousands of acres of land. And 172 acres are very important to me and very important in northeastern Pennsylvania. It's a site where North Point Development, partnering with the Earth Conservancy, who partnered with Northampton Fuel, the old blue coal land, 16,000 acres, sat vacant and degraded for 4 decades. Now, because of programs like the Coal Refuge Program, because of investments like Growing Greener, which, by the way, the Senate passed the structure of Growing Greener this past week, Growing Greener 3, we now reclaim that site. We've generated $125 million in private investment, and we're creating 3,000 jobs. Now, back to climate change, the other component is, and I believe DEP and the Governor Wolf has been very aggressive on this, is methane capture. That's very important. And methane capture, I know a lot of the focus is on the new natural gas industry, but we really should be looking at the old utility lines that are in Wilkes-Barre, Allentown, the old third-class cities throughout Pennsylvania. A lot of those natural gas lines are over 100 years of age. We should be having an investment in that infrastructure, upgrading that infrastructure. That captures methane, and that deals much better with making sure that we're aggressive on climate change.
Thank you.
Pass. I mean, I don't think anybody on this panel is going to provide a better answer on this.
Okay, well, that would be great, because we do have some more issues. Does anybody else want to specifically address that? And then we can move on to several topics people want us to
Just
address.
generally speaking, I think that it's important to recognize that climate change is man-made. I think it's important for the Commonwealth to advance alternative energy solutions, that wind, solar, hydro, nuclear. I think that it's fair to say, as the Senator said, that a diversified portfolio is a smart way to go, and that we do our level best to try and reduce and minimize the amount of carbon that goes into the atmosphere.
Thank you. The next we'll start, is anybody else? I'm sorry. Okay, I think we'll start with Senator Udicek on this one. We haven't addressed at all the issue of health care, and how are we going to fund health care, and... I'm sorry?
I may cede the microphone to Eddie. He's got about a 45-minute dissertation on this. Healthcare, and I'll keep my comment brief so there could be more time, but when we talk about the cost drivers in whether it's state government, local government, school districts, healthcare is at the top of the list. Pension obligations are at the top of the list. And we've tackled pension reform in Pennsylvania. I would have liked to have been a little more aggressive in pension reform, but we did have bipartisan pension reform move. Healthcare is a tougher, more complex issue to me, because when you hear about cutting costs, I remind folks one of the biggest cost drivers that we have is healthcare for seniors in Pennsylvania, long-term care. It's an issue that we don't like to talk about. You don't hear too many folks talk about how much they invest in long-term insurance so that they're not spending thousands of dollars a month to provide for their long-term care in a nursing home. But it's hundreds upon hundreds of millions of dollars in the state budget that increase at rates of 15 to 30% each and every year. So it is and certainly there is the federal component, there's a state component, and there's a local component to healthcare. We need to do a better job in making sure, and you're seeing healthcare evolve right before our eyes. Caremark CVS is a company in the 14th Senatorial District, close to 700 jobs, tremendous asset to the community. They just purchased a health insurance provider, Aetna, and you'll start to see these CVS drugstores be more like clinics, and you're seeing less acute care hospitals being built. I'm grateful that Geisinger invested in South Wilkes-Barre and that we have the emergency unit back up in South Wilkes-Barre. There's a lot of volatility in it, and then when you get into the pharmaceutical side of the equation and the rising cost of pharmaceuticals or the opioid crisis that we have, significant challenges are on the horizon for the next 2 decades on healthcare. We're going to work in a bipartisan way to try to address those, to control budgets and make sure there's access to affordable care.
The only thing I'll talk about here is the importance of the CHIP program. We've seen over the course of the last, 2 weeks, how it's been used as a bargaining tool at the federal level. You have over 180,000 children in the Commonwealth who rely upon CHIP for their primary source of health care insurance, over 4,000, I think 500 here in Luzerne County. It's disheartening to see how it's being tossed about as part of a wall or as part of border security and used as a tool in the negotiating process when it affects literally hundreds of thousands of lives here in the Commonwealth. So that's all I want to talk about with regard to health care.
Obviously, the CHIP program, the reauthorization was very significant for children across Pennsylvania. One of the things that many people look to from the partnership that Pennsylvania agreed to accept Medicaid expansion here in the Commonwealth. That means 700,000 people are now eligible for health care through Medicaid expansion. And if you look at the cost of that, if they had received that care through our state 100% funded state line item, actually we are saving money in the Commonwealth, because even with what we have to pay toward that, right now it's 95%, it will go to 90%. That still is a cost savings of covering all of those folks. The challenge will be if the federal government makes a change, potentially block grants the money back to the states. That will mean there will be issues and things that we need to look at. As I mentioned earlier, as you look at Medicaid, the biggest cost driver in that area is for care of the elderly. And Aaron spoke briefly about presumptive eligibility. That's something that through Medicaid, MCO, and looking at managed care, potentially will be a part of that, because we know people want to age in place in their own homes, and the difficulty is that you can immediately go into the nursing home at $8,000 a month, as opposed to receiving your care at home through home and community-based care. So just as we look at Medicaid expansion, the interesting component to that is it has saved the Commonwealth money as our participation in that.
Thank you. The United States of America is the only industrialized nation in the entire world that does not provide universal health coverage for all its citizens. On top of that, the United States of America pays double of what any other industrialized nation pays in the world. That should be the red flag. I'm going to give you another number. Back in 1992, that's 26 years ago, a gold plan for a family of 4, based upon today's analysis of a gold plan under Affordable Care Act, cost, anybody want to take a guess? $4,000 to $4,500 a year. A year. Today, that same plan costs $20,000. That's 5 times. Nobody's salary has increased 5 times. The reason why health care was so important to me was because I recognized that that one issue became such a dominating factor in bargaining negotiations. So as a former union guy, as we would bargain our contract, and health care was part of it, it became the more important part. Salary was not the important part. The people would say, forget about my salary, just keep my health care because it's increasing in cost. In the 90s, 20, 30, 40%. So if we realize that an individual that has a family of 4 has to pay 20 grand, what kind of job do you have to have in order to afford that? And then pay your taxes and your mortgage and your car payment, etc. It's out of control. And the only way our federal government is talking about reducing cost is this table, that table, that table, and that table. You're not going to have health care, but you will. We reduced your cost because we eliminated those people. That, to me, is unconscionable. You cannot consider the health care operation a business like you do free enterprise. In business, if I invent this cup and people want to buy it, they buy it. And because it's being so popular, I increase the price to $100 a cup and they still buy it, that's okay. And now I increase it to $1,000, that's okay because the people want to buy it. But the person that can't afford this cup can buy this for 50 cents, and life goes on. But with health care, you do not have that choice. If you get cancer and you do not have health care, you're bankrupt, or you won't be able to get the kinds of things that you need. You're going to die. Health care is moral. It's about life and death. It's difficult for me to see how we can make a decision to say, these tables don't get it, so we can reduce the cost here, and yet the CEO from an insurance company can make $100 million a year. The lowest paid insurance executive, CEO, that I was able to find paid $31,500 a day. A day. A day. So what I'm saying is, as Americans, as human beings, we know we have compassion. We don't want to see people suffer. But there has to be some kind of mantra here where there's a balance. And I'm saying that that CEO deserves to get a quality pay. Can you live on 500 grand a year? I don't know, is that fair? But $100 million and then refuse these people that life and death solution to their lives? This is where I have the problem right now. This is a moral issue. Yes, competition is good. And no question about that. But we are dealing with something that is moral, it's life and death. It is not about purchasing something that you don't need. This is something we all will need. And as pointed out before, yeah, we're getting older. Yes, it's costing more money. If it wasn't for Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security, where would our seniors be? So again, we come back to that word I talked about before, balance. We need a balance here. We need to be reasonable, we need to be human, and we need to make sure we make the tough decisions. So I'm asking all of you, as you leave outside, I have a I have 2 pamphlets, one on grandparents raising grandchildren, because that's a big problem that we're facing, and the other one is titled, Is Our Government Broken? Read that, see what you think, get back to me, and I'll buy you lunch and we can talk about it. But healthcare is one of the largest cost drivers. It has driven up the cost in our municipalities, our schools, our businesses, our lives. People on cancer, $45,000 a month to live. A pill, $2,000 per pill.
Okay, I'd like to get to a couple more issues. Is there
Yes,
anything you
I'm
want
sorry.
to
I'm
close
sorry.
up with
Thank
on the
you.
healthcare issue? Okay, thank you.
Sorry. I need a drink after that.
Use the expensive cup.
Oh, Mike, you don't have anything more? Okay, so we have a few other issues that maybe you all can choose among them and which ones you'd like to address. People have had questions on legalization of marijuana, on where we are with the Real ID. People are hearing about Real ID. If we go to the airport, we're not going to be able to get on airplanes. If we could let us know what's going on with that. And also, if there's anything that we have not questioned you on, if you could just take a few minutes and just sort of sum up, and if any of these other issues are of interest to you, you could address those. Thank you.
All right, well then, the Real ID, I'll take that one. The Commonwealth has been granted a waiver from the federal government to allow us the opportunity to phase in the new driver's licenses that will come online next year. And so for those folks that have concerns about getting onto a federal installation or onto an commercial air flight, no concerns with respect to the Pennsylvania driver's license, thanks to the extension and the necessary extensions that we need until we get to the point where there's a Real ID in Pennsylvania. I have every expectation that'll happen. I do have some small concerns with the Real ID when we implement it with PennDOT and the current mechanism and the current plan to allow folks the choice of whether or not to have a driver's license that is a Real ID versus a driver's license that's not Real ID compliant. Pennsylvania drivers will be given that choice. The Real ID will be more expensive than the non-Real ID. My suspicion is some folks will select the cheaper alternative that won't be Real ID compliant, and then someday they're going to show up at the airport and they're going to be told this is not a Real ID, therefore you can't get on the plane. That was a nod that I was opposed to, but I was in the minority on this one with respect to asking people across the state to pay for a Real ID and impose a higher fee on those folks. This mechanism that we've come up with now, giving people a choice, I just have a concern that people will select the cheaper alternative and say to themselves, I don't need to worry about Real ID, I don't go to on a plane anywhere, I don't go to a federal installation, and then 2 or 3 years later they're going to realize they want to go to Florida, and then they're going to be turned away. And so I think there's some problems on the horizon with respect to implementation, but as far as the current landscape with respect to Real ID, we're fine in Pennsylvania for the moment. Just generally speaking, in terms of what I work on, you know, I represent a district that really is unique in a lot of ways, smack between the city of Scranton and the city of Wilkes-Barre. I do represent the city of Pittston. A little bit of a misnomer. I'm not sure the city of Pittston, with its 8,500 people, is a real city with respect to comparison to Philadelphia or Pittsburgh or even Scranton or Wilkes-Barre. But the communities I represent, by and large, I'm really proud of the progress that they've made over the last number of years. The communities that extend from Bear Creek all the way to Jefferson Township in Lackawanna County are really well run. The folks that serve in local government in those communities do a really good job. And I've always viewed it as my role to be their partner, to make sure that I support them and augment their efforts to make sure that the communities, whether the very smallest townships like Buck Township in Luzerne County, or the largest townships, whether it's Plains or Jefferson Township, and the city of Pittston, have an advocate in Harrisburg that works with them to make sure that we advance the interests of the folks in my district. And so I'm proud of the work that we've done in conjunction. This is not a sole proprietorship in every way. This is a partnership. And I'm proud to be a partner with all of the folks that are leaders of my communities, and I look forward to doing that for the foreseeable future, provided that the voters see fit to keep me there. It's a high honor to serve as a state representative. I think it's fair to say, on behalf of the entire panel, we really enjoy the opportunity to make a difference in our communities. And I think that it's fair to say that we all do. And so from my perspective, I appreciate the opportunity and the responsibility given to me. by the communities that I represent, and I look forward to doing it for the next 2 years.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Representative Coffer, any issues that we haven't addressed? And one of the issues, as I mentioned, was legalization of marijuana.
I was going to touch on that one, then I was going to touch on some issues I'm working on. So I think in the next several weeks, we're going to have our medical marijuana program up in our area. We will have a ribbon cutting. I believe it's in a couple weeks at the Edwardsville location. I believe it's called Justice Grown. Don't quote me on that, but I believe that's the name of their facility. But they will be opening up in the very near future. That legislation has been up and coming. I was one of the people that worked on that legislation originally to get that up and going. I think the next step, I think this is a generational issue. I think it depends on where you're from and how old you are. It might depend on your perspective on this. Personally, I think the next step in the process is decriminalization. I support that, and I think we have much bigger fish to fry than people who are smoking marijuana in regard to the opioid epidemic, any of the narcotics that are out there, and a large number of issues. But I do want to touch base without filibustering all the time here to talk on some of the initiatives I've been working on recently. I've been working on welfare to work reform, trying to address some of the benefits cliffs that are out there. One of the ones that we solved that was part of a bill that I had that was signed into law was a child care subsidy cliff. So at $12.75 an hour, you'd receive a child care subsidy, and as soon as you made $13 an hour, you lost that entire subsidy. So people kept on falling back into that cycle of poverty. As you earn that little bit more, the benefits that you lost actually lowered your quality of life. So one of the bills I put forward in the legislature is to try to streamline and smooth out some of those benefits cliffs. It was started under Dave Reed and the Poverty Initiative. It's been a focus going back to actually the Speaker when he was the policy chairman, currently under Kerry Benninghoff, who's our current policy chair, and we put together a package of legislation on benefits that go beyond in our state of what other states are doing and try to make sure that we're trying to lift people out of poverty. And some of that, I mentioned that one bill about trying to streamline some of the benefits cliffs. Right now, the way it's drafted, it is my bill that Luzerne County would be a pilot program for this legislation to see exactly how much it would cost. And hopefully we'll have another couple of counties come on board to help lift people out of poverty and get back to work. But another thing that I'm also involved with is incentive-based workforce development, that tying our high priority occupations to actually putting the money into those type of programs that are needed in our community. I think this isn't a shot at any means, but I think we can be doing better than our current system, and I think our career link system is a little outdated, and that we should be putting money and resources into programs that actually connect people to jobs. And I've been working in a very bipartisan manner from people from the building trades, the Commonwealth Foundation, which is a pretty wide group in Harrisburg to be working with, but I've been working on putting together a bill on that, and am hoping that that will pass here, so we are actually doing a much better job putting state resources into actually connecting people with jobs.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And since it appears that we're reaching the end, I again wanted to thank the League of Women Voters. When I look back at that banner and see that your mission statement is the promotion of political responsibility through informed and active participation in government, I mean, that is capsulized in what's happening here today, and in your case in the redistricting issue. Wonderful, and again, I want to thank you and look forward to continuing to attend these in the future. The first thing I wanted to talk about, which was the issue presented by the audience, was where are we at with legalization of marijuana. I was fortunate to have one of the grower processors assigned to my district, Standard Farms in Whitehaven. Had an extensive meeting with them this week on some issues. They are about 2 weeks away from their first harvest, about 4 weeks away from their first provision of product to the distributors. So we're about a month away, and that would be in line with what Aaron's telling you about the ribbon cutting at his distributor. They do have a serious concern, though. That is a skeletal market right now. That's why we took care in determining how many licenses we would provide. Yet at the same time right now, the administration is considering Chapter 20 licenses. Chapter 20 licenses are licenses that would be issued to essentially medical colleges, research institutes. And they're looking at providing up to 8 of these across the state. Each one of these Chapter 20 licenses would have the ability to then distribute to 6 distributors. So you're looking at now 48 more players in the game. And I can tell you that My grower processor is extremely concerned about that. I have a meeting scheduled with the governor's office next week to see what we can do to not necessarily delay, but make certain that we are crossing all of our T's and dotting all of our I's so that we are not negatively impacting the folks who have put up serious capital and effort and commitment to our communities to make certain that this program gets off to the right start. The last thing we want to do is cut the legs out from under them. Secondly, with regard to marijuana growth here in Pennsylvania, thankfully, the DOH reversed course on an issue that affected many of the folks that I represent who are gun owners. There was an oversight. They came out with an announcement, was it last week or earlier this week, that indicated that they would no longer be providing the names of our medical marijuana recipients to the appropriate authorities to stop them from, their Second Amendment right to possess a firearm. So that's just two updates on what's happening on the marijuana front. Personally, working on a couple things. I have a bill in the House, but it seems to be the Senate bill that's moving. It's the Public Safety Facilities Act. And anybody who's familiar with what happened here a year ago with SCI Retreat, SCI Frackville, where we were, blindsided in the first week of January, and Senator Udechok lead, but Senator Udechok, Senator Baker, everybody from the Northeastern delegation came together, and in a matter of 20 days, we're able to get all affected parties on board, schedule hearings in the Senate in Harrisburg, and present an argument that the process was flawed and why closure of any of those institutions would be detrimental to our entire region. My bill and the Senate bill that's moving prescribes a process that requires notice and hearings and evidence, fact-based evidence before any closure would occur. I'm happy to report that in speaking with Senator Udechok, that bill came out of Senate committee last week or this week, I can't recall, and hopefully it'll make its way to the floor and then get over to the House, and I will do everything in my power to convince my colleagues of how important it is. One thing we haven't talked about, for 6 years I've been the Democratic Vice Chair of the Game and Fisheries Committee. We haven't had any outdoor issues, but as you know, outdoor sports for our men and women here in northeastern Pennsylvania is very important, something we take seriously, has a great impact on our economy. I've had a bill since day one to change the way our antlerless deer licenses are allocated. I've had trouble getting that off the floor. Met with a Republican senator from Erie, Senator Dan Laughlin, who is of like mind to me, had some similar issues in his county, and he has agreed to see what he can do to get that bill pushed out of the Senate. So maybe with somebody from the majority party backing it, it's something we can get to the finish line. I don't care whose name is on it. I just want what's best for my constituents. So we'd like to see that bill get to the finish line. But again, thank you everybody for coming and listening to us and being so involved. With that, I'll pass it to the senator.
Thank you. I too want to say thank you. And obviously there are many issues that you're interested in. I would just encourage all of you, if you haven't signed up on each of our collective websites, I have a newsletter that is electronically distributed. I get emails, I get Twitter posts, Facebook posts, all of that. You can stay connected. You can also go onto my own website to see what bills I have introduced, what bills or things I'm working on. So I would encourage you to do that. Much of what we do surrounds the committees that we serve on. I serve on 5 committees as Chair of Health and Human Services. We have the oversight of all of the drug and alcohol, the health, and all the human service programs across the Commonwealth, including licensing and things of that nature. The opioid crisis, we have advanced many proposals out of the committee to address that. Some were Representative Coffer's bills. I actually have a bill that just left the Senate and has gone to the House that would give home health and hospice workers the ability to destroy prescription drugs. And what most people don't realize, the DEA in 2014 made a rule modification that it became your personal property on your death, and that only you or your assigned family member could destroy that medication. So you've been seeing take-back programs, working with the DAs, the sheriffs, and some of the pharmacies, but the home health nurse who's in your home no longer had the ability to do that. My bill would change that. It would grant authority for them to be able to do that. We'll keep it out of the medicine cabinet. Actually, it was brought to my attention by a county coroner who had a family member find it in the medicine cabinet and have an overdose situation in the community. So taking away that pathway at home quickly, when you're grieving, you're not thinking about the medicine to destroy, and that's just one area. Pipeline safety has been an area of interest for me, given my sprawling 20th senatorial district that has significant Marcellus shale development. I have a bill that would offer minimum standards for Class 1 pipelines. They are not regulated by the state or federal government. There are draft rules through FERC to take care of them, but there are no minimum standards for that. With one-call reauthorization, that was also a bill that I worked on, we added Class 1 lines. So before you dig and you call, Class 1 lines are now part of that program. We beefed up its enforcement, moved it to the Public Utility Commission, and I think it's a very strong public interest program. As Representative Mullery said, Senator Yudichak and I, along with Dave Argel and several of our colleagues, have the prison closure bill. We're also working cooperatively on a lead task force to look at what Pennsylvania needs to do to address lead in the water and lead in our young children. And one of the things that we're considering is uniform testing for children. After hearing pediatricians talk about that, the number who actually are getting tested is very, very small, but the impact, if you discover it, is so significant. So many issues we're working on. Those are just a few of the highlights. If you have questions, don't hesitate. Please keep in touch. And I think you can tell from the interaction that we have, we joke around. We don't always agree on everything, but we do agree to try to work in the best interest of this region. And it's a privilege to work with my colleagues.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you very much. Again, I thank the League of Women Voters. It's so important for you to go out there and explore and find the truth. I can't tell you how much I feel about this position. It's an honor to me to serve. It's a privilege to serve. And there is definitely nothing more gratifying when we can help our constituents or help the people of Pennsylvania. I do not look at party. I don't see party. I don't see race. I don't see color. I don't see creed. I see Pennsylvanians. I see Americans. And I see that we're all in this together. And I try to find a way to deal with the problems that we face. And again, it's a pleasure and an honor to serve. As far as things that I'm working on, I think many of you know that grandparents raising grandchildren has been an issue for me for a number of years. I'm proud to say that the governor's now on board, and I have the help and guidance of Catherine Watson, who's the Republican chair of Children and Youth. We've developed a coalition where we're going to put together a package of bills that will help grandparents having to raise grandchildren. My bill is House Bill 1539. There's another House Bill 662 that deals with kinship navigators, and also these bills deal with the fact that many of these grandparents are put in this position because of the opioid problem. 40% is between alcohol addiction and opioids. And the stories are just heartbreaking. So if there's any grandparents, any folks that you're aware of that may need some help or guidance, I do have that booklet. We have a website that we put together, and we're working hard to try to get the right kind of legislation to provide respite, to provide emergency guardianship for these grandparents so they can actually take care of the kids. In closing, I've been given the privilege of also being the agriculture chairman. Now, what would a city guy like me be doing as the agriculture chairman? But the former agriculture chair comes from another city guy, Mike Carroll, and he was the former ag chairman. It's been an absolute blast. I really enjoyed it. I say to the people that are in the ag community, I'm probably very much like you. I had no idea how complex, how huge the ag industry is. It's not just growing corn and producing milk and meat. It's security, it's safety, our food safety, checking the plants and the various places that we consume the product. It's science, it's chemistry, it's banking, it's machinery, it's huge. It's over 580,000 jobs in Pennsylvania and well over $135 billion of economic development. So that's also been a great learning experience. I would also like to encourage you to attend the farm show. Yes, it's over now, but it's going to be next year in January. It's always like the second week of January, but it is the largest indoor farm show in the entire country. Pennsylvania provides food not just for Pennsylvania, but for the country and also for the world. So go out there, buy PA preferred, PA grown. Go out there and support your Pennsylvania products. Thank you very much. Pleasure.
Thank you. I was just going to say, like the farm show, we're going to be over now. I thank you very much to our representatives and senators for joining us this morning. Again, this is going to be showing on. All right, thanks, Aaron. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.